What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning into The Standard. Today, our guest is Collin Castellaw. He was one of the first influences on me on how to actually create a business on the online side of things, and he's a phenomenal basketball coach. Super excited for this chat today. One thing I got to ask you, do you still have that step back jumper? When we first met, I couldn't stand guarding you, and that was my whole job at the Boys and Girls Club, was to guard you, just put my hand up, and you'd still hit it in my face. Do you still got that jumper?
I always will have the step back. Everything else is trash. So that's the only thing I got going for me. Can't hit the catch and shoots, can't get to the bucket, but the step back is like riding a bike at this point, I think.
I love it, man. So started out as a teacher, went and did shop mechanics.
Yep.
Now just reading from you, Players Media Group, Pro Class, Players TV. What kind of started the journey? What kind of gave you the vision and the idea and the goal to do something like that?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of stuff starts with failure, right? And most of where I'm at today started from a lot of failure. So when I first started Shop Mechanics, it started as a website. I sunk my life savings into it, created 200 plus training videos, put it on a website, and then didn't realize how to get people to a website. I just assumed thousands of people magically showed up. They didn't. And so the whole kind of media YouTube stuff started because I was I don't know what to do with all this content. Nobody's coming to the website. YouTube seems like maybe it's going to be a thing. So I started dripping out the content there and started building the YouTube audience. So I kind of accidentally stumbled into the whole ecosystem, and then as I started growing audience and started growing a following, I kind of fell more in love with the actual content production side of the equation. So that's kind of what launched me down the path. And so it's been super interesting because each kind of phase of the journey has been just kind of an organic, interesting kind of shift, right? Okay. And most of the time it's just from more so what I'm passionate and interested about. The YouTube stuff was really fun. And it was a great way to learn about online business and learn about, making money online and kind of digital marketing, all that sort of good stuff. But at a certain point, it kind of felt like I topped out, and it was okay, I've got the YouTube subscribers, I've done a bunch of views, I've, kind of topped the business out from a monetary perspective, probably as far as it can go. What's the next frontier? And that's kind of when the Players TV stuff came along and was hey, I think this is something that could be, kind of maybe the next future or wave in athlete media. And so that's kind of how we got down into it.
I love it, man. So you have, I think 1.3 million followers on YouTube. When did you start doing that? And what do you think separated you? I'm asking you selfishly for us. What separated you to where you could get that following? And I know you had tons of interaction too. It wasn't just views. I mean, so many. I mean, even talking with Cherry and guys here, everybody knows Shop Mechanics still. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you think you were doing that helped separate you? And not an NBA player.
Yep.
Didn't train NBA guys, but it was so real and it was so raw. But I mean, what do you think you did, that helped separate you to help you get those followers and that brand?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, I'm an educator by nature. Okay. So I think I've had my mom was an elementary education professor. My dad used to be a teacher before he went back to school. So I think education has always been a piece of my DNA. Okay. And that comes through in content. Yep. And I think the hardest part about being a successful trainer in general is taking the knowledge and being able to transfer it into somebody else, right? It's why a lot of NBA players don't necessarily make great trainers. It's why some of the best athletes don't necessarily make the best trainers, is because it's the transfer of knowledge which is so important. And so I think I innately have a God-given ability when it comes to teaching. And so I think that was probably the first part. The second part I would say was I was very kind of specific and strategic in giving people what they wanted up front, but giving people what they needed in the background. Okay. So on YouTube it might look like something like, the top 3 sick ankle-breaking crossovers for devastating results or whatever. But in the actual video it might be, hey, we're working on pound dribbles, and now we're working on in and out pound dribble. Now we're working on the third generation of the combo. So you have to kind of give the marketing or the sizzle on the front end to get kids and athletes excited about watching the content. But then on the back end you want to give the fundamentals. I think a lot of times, especially in the content space, coaches either sell out to one or two of the options. They're I'm not doing that. I'm not going to, be about the sizzle. It's about hard work. It's about reps. Right. That's what we're going to do. And if we're going to make content, it's going to be like that, and kids aren't going to watch it because it's boring and fundamental, right? And then, or they jump the shark and they go the other direction where they're yo, I'm chasing clicks and I'm chasing views online. And so all of a sudden they're doing things that they maybe normally wouldn't do. And they were, trying things that are a little bit outlandish. And then that kind of maybe turns them into a meme with the serious trainers. And so I think a lot of times, especially in kind of the sports training space, there's kind of that like fork in the road and most people go right or left. Whereas like I really was very kind of specific in trying to go down the middle where it's like, hey, how do you have the marketing and kind of interesting pieces, but also back it with like just really great training on the back end.
That's awesome, man. That's to show that and to show that brand. I mean, that's one of the hardest things for us, dude. Like I'm trying to figure out how to show quality, you know what I mean? And Robert's helped me a ton with that, but it's like, it's so easy to show a kid who just lifts a heavy weight or runs the fastest anybody, you know what I mean? That's cool, but it also doesn't show what we're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't show like the culture or the buy-in that my coaches are getting with the kids, you know what I mean? But to be able to illustrate that in a way that somebody wants to watch is
100%.
extremely hard, and that's been awesome to have Robert and stealing from guys like you know what I mean? So it's been awesome. So you went from YouTube. Give me the next couple of steps. Kind of fill me into where you're at now.
Yeah, so kind of towards the tail end of like really going to YouTube full time, doing it hard.
When was that?
So I launched the YouTube channel in like 2012, I want to say, and then drip content out, started to grow quite a bit. You know, YouTube only launched in 2005, so it really hadn't been, you know, much of a juggernaut up through about 2013 is when it really like started to take off. Like when I launched the channel, I think maybe I'm Possible Training was the largest basketball training channel, or maybe Michael Lancaster, one of the two. Same guy, but
that's awesome.
He rebranded. But I think they only had like 22,000 subscribers. So like the top company only had 22,000 subscribers on YouTube at the time. So it wasn't like, you know, I was getting into the game really late. I'm big on, you know, being super honest when it comes to like kind of business and success. Like I got lucky to be ready to do the thing at the right time as YouTube was getting to grow. So, you know, there's a little bit of luck that goes along with it. So 2012 started to scale it, did it full time for about 8 years, you know, and then kind of around like 2019 started to feel like kind of hit the cap. You know, there was a lot more saturation in the market. You know, basketball content for free was getting to be like kind of everywhere. You know, things like Instagram were starting to be huge. You know, obviously TikTok came along. And so essentially I was like kind of ready for the next chapter and the next chase. And so I had hired a marketing guy who we kind of like organically met. No, so Jake's my content guy.
Oh, okay.
So, and he's worked with me for a long time. But my marketing guy's my co-founder at Players TV, Duran Guidry.
Okay.
And we were connected because he was representing a handful of different pro athletes. And he had an athlete that was an endorsement of like a shooting aid product. And so he was looking to see how they could get more eyeballs on it. I was like one of the biggest shooting guys at the time. So he hit me and was like, hey, you don't work with professional athletes, at least that I can tell. Would you like to work with some pros? And in exchange, would love to have you, you know, maybe review this product or whatever.
Love it.
So that was how we first connected. And then as we kind of started to grow, I saw that he was really good at kind of like the marketing perspective, selling to brands, selling to sponsorships, that sort of stuff. He was like, hey, who's doing your sponsorship sales? I was like, nobody. They just kind of come in from time to time. He was like, hey, can I do an Eat What We Kill sort of thing where anything I bring you, I just get a percentage of? I was like, hey, that sounds great. So then over the next like 2 years, we did deals with Leaning in China. So I was technically the first basketball trainer to have like a shoe deal. Most people don't know that.
That's cool.
And then essentially, so, you know, that was like a multi-six-figure deal that we did with Leaning in China. And then we parlayed that afterwards into a deal with East Bay Foot Locker. So I had to deal with them. And then a handful of other kind of like, you know, sponsorship deals along the way. And so as we were going, you know, we were kind of like, hey, I'm cool, but I'm just like your random dude in Idaho, you know, training people. Used to be an art teacher. And so we were like, hey, what if we had like the same kind of training component with athletes, right? You know, if you could learn from like the best athletes in the world, take kind of my expertise from the programming side and match it with the athletes, star power and skill sets and all that sort of good stuff. So that was kind of the initial phase of what we were looking to launch. Pro Class, our current vertical. But the more athletes we talked to and kind of went out into the ecosystem, the more we heard like, hey, that's cool, but like I really want to make a documentary. Hey, that's cool, I really want to start a podcast. Hey, that's cool, I have this docuseries that I think would be super dope, right? And so the low-hanging fruit was kind of the virtual training, but it seemed like where the hockey puck was moving to, where athletes were really excited about, was this kind of like new media. You know, now a ton of athletes have podcasts and that sort of stuff. But in 2019, it was basically like LeBron was doing some stuff, and then, you know, a handful of guys had started production companies, but it was really pretty early on. And so we were like, hey, okay, cool, we'll keep Procast on the back burner. We'll think about it later, and we'll kind of chase this, you know, wave that it seems like athletes are really interested in. So we brought in another athlete, a guy named Anthony Tolliver, who'd worked with both of us in the past, like a 10-year NBA vet. Super good dude, business-minded guy, and he was kind of our like connector to pieces in the industry, and then we just kind of rolled with it from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
man. That's crazy. I got to ask you on those deals, walk through me on that process on how you negotiated those, or how you. I mean, obviously it sounds like you had a guy that helped you, you know, get that connection, but How does something like that work, and how do you guys come to an agreement on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it all comes down to basically two things: leverage and reach, right? And so, like, at the end of the day, brands want eyeballs, and what can you do to kind of like deliver eyeballs? And the big thing that separated us from, I would say, 99% of like your online influencers is that we had like a back-end support digital marketing system to like work with everything. So like East Bay Foot Locker at the time, they really loved that like essentially I could do a shoe review, I could do an encore performance, I could wear them during a tutorial breakdown, but I could make content specifically around it. So like if they had the new Kobe shoe drop, I could do, you know, videos around Kobe Bryant moves, Kobe Bryant scoring moves, whatever it was. So it was like a very organic one-to-one fit from a content perspective.
Gotcha.
Right? So brands, I think, especially, you know, 2019, 2017, kind of in that range, the whole like, you know, this video is brought to you by DraftKings was like already out in the marketplace, and it was, you know, kind of the industry standard. But really tailoring content around the product, around the brand wasn't something that was being done very often. So I'd say that's probably like the first piece. The second piece from the digital marketing perspective, you know, the bulk of Shout Mechanics revenue came from selling training programs. So, you know, shooting workouts, ball handling workouts, scoring workouts, whatever. And so I already had the back-end digital marketing ecosystem set out of like email drip campaigns, you know, back-end user management with, you know, usernames, passwords, all that sort of stuff. And so I could do things that were different than most, you know, influencers or trainers to partner with them. So like, for example, we did like I want to say it was called like the Mamba scoring system, where we made like a workout specifically around Kobe Bryant. They had a new Kobe Bryant shoe that dropped. And so we basically said like, hey, anybody who's a member gets it for free. So we drove signups and email signups and that sort of stuff. Then we built out an email drip system where over, I think it was like 10 days, it was 4 or 5 emails would go out, and it was like, hey, hope you're enjoying the workout. Think about this when you're doing these drills. You know, next email will go, hey, don't forget you can pick up the, you know, Kobe AD that just launched on East Bay, blah, blah, blah. And so we were doing a lot of the like digital marketing on the back end, whereas like, you know, normally if a brand sponsors an influencer, they get like a post on Instagram and it goes in a feed. Somebody sees it, they might give it a like, and then they just move on with their life. Whereas like we had like a heavy digital marketing piece on the back end where we were sending SMS notifications to people about like, yo, you know, new workout just dropped. Also, don't forget you can, you know, pick up your 3 different colorways of the Kobe AD, blah, blah, blah. And so really pairing the like actual results for the brand, I think was what really made a big difference. And so we kind of pilot ran it with Leaning, which they were great to work with, but working with a Chinese company that was early on in basketball, they like hadn't done a ton of stuff. So like just getting clothes that fit me were really difficult. I'd ask for like, you know, hey, I need shirts and shorts to shoot videos, and they'd send like 12 basketballs, and I'd be like, hey, these are cool, but like I need shorts and shirts. So like we basically kind of utilized the framework from the Leaning deal originally to then like show other brands, hey, this is what we can do. This is this really cool thing we did with Leaning, blah, blah, blah. So essentially kind of like set the foundation on that first deal and then kind of parlayed it going forward.
Man, that story's crazy. So when you were teaching, I always like to know, like, because you didn't make money obviously right away from YouTube.
Yeah.
And your website. You know, how long, like, did you quit teaching and go all in first, or did you wait until you built revenue, or like how did that process go? Like, how long were you just putting in the work before you even had any reward or any income?
I was teaching. I taught full time for 4 years after getting my certificate. And about 2 years in, I was like, I really want to make basketball a full-time gig. I love teaching, but I don't know if that means I'm going to go back to school and be a graduate assistant. My sister was married to the son of a Division I coach at the time, and that seemed like a really tough lifestyle, you know, low job security, you got to work for a long time before you get paid. I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. And then, you know, basketball training was starting to be a thing. It wasn't, you know, we all now have trainers and guys are charging great hourly rates and group rates and stuff, but back in 2010, that wasn't really happening.
Especially in Idaho.
Yeah, especially in Idaho. I mean, I was getting like, you know, hour-long workouts for $20 a pop and that sort of stuff back then. And so I was like, I want to figure out how to make this a full-time gig with basketball, but how does it fit my skill set? I had a background in graphic design and a little bit of web development and video editing, that sort of stuff. And I was like, I think the internet could be a thing. Like, I think online training is going to end up being bigger. And so that's where I kind of decided to move the focus into. That's when I decided to build a website and sink all the life savings into it and ultimately have the flop. But so I did it probably while teaching for about 1.5 years or 2 years, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And what was wild was, so I started building an audience, and I got up to like maybe 50,000 subscribers, something like that. And I was like, I think I can drop a product. Because there was another company called I Love Basketball TV that was growing at about the same pace, but a little faster than me. And they were dropping products like, vertical jump training products, shooting products. And I was like, oh, like this is how we make money. Because a lot of people don't realize you don't really make that much money on YouTube from the ads that play before the videos unless you're just hammering views or if you're in a market that makes a lot of money. So like finance channels might make a $30 CPM, which means for every 1,000 views, they might make $30.
Okay.
Sports channels might make more like a $4 CPM. And so essentially, for every million views I got on YouTube, I'd make about $1,500 to $2,000.
Okay.
And so a lot of people are like, oh, yo, like you 2 million views a month, like you're killing it. It's like, well, like I've got enough to live, but that's about it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I got to launch programs. It seems like they're working. They, this I Love Basketball TV company kept launching programs over and over again. I was like, okay, I'm going to put together a great shooting workout. I called it the 10-minute shooting trainer. I was like, it's going to be like a press play and workout with me in real time type thing. Nobody was doing that. I was like, if I make it 99 cents and I can get like 10,000 people to buy it, I'm like straight up rich, like 100% wealthy. I'm gonna buy a helicopter. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, right? And I was like, I got 60,000 or 50,000 subscribers. Like it's a no-brainer, and 99 cents. And so I actually put it as a promo, and I think it's still there to this day on one of my all-time most viewed videos. It was a Steph Curry shooting secrets video. It was like I knew it was gonna go bonkers. Steph was like on his like major ascent, 2-time MVP level type stuff. So I put it as like a little promo right on the front of the video. Hey, get your 10-minute shooting trainer. Link in the description. Blah blah blah. That video starts going viral. It was by far the best video I'd ever done. And in the first week, I'd sold 7 copies of the 10-minute shooting trainer at 99 cents a piece. So I
made $7.
Yeah, like 6 whatever after the fees.
And then $3 after taxes.
And so I was like, yo, if I can only make like $6 on 50,000 subscribers, like I don't think this is viable long term. So I actually took like a little bit of a pause. I had content scheduled out for a while, and I remodeled my house at the time. I put in like a bunch of windows and new doors and stuff, and was like, I don't know if this is a viable business. But in the same time, I kept watching I Love Basketball TV, and they kept putting out programs, and I was like, they wouldn't keep like doing programs if they were making $7
if you weren't
every
winning.
time.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, their stuff looked like trash. Like their editing wasn't that great, their graphics weren't that great, their websites and landing pages were pretty terrible. And so I actually just sent a cold email off to their email in their about section. Was like, hey, my name's Colin. I run Shop Mechanics. I really like your guys' stuff. I think it doesn't look that great. I'd be more than willing to help you in that regard if you guys maybe would like to help me on whatever monetization looks like. Didn't hear back for a while, and then finally got an email back from a guy named Adam Linkenauger, who kind of became one of my business mentors after this. And he was the guy who started I Love Basketball TV. He was one of the very first vertical jump trainer guys online. Okay. He's a 7-time ACC high jump champion from Clemson. And so basically he was like a high jumper that then kind of learned a lot about marketing and was one of these first kind of like digital marketing kids when the internet was starting to go crazy. And so I think he saw a lot in me as far as like my ability to teach, my ability to make things like look kind of decent. And he was like, hey, how about we do a win-win? I'll teach you kind of the monetization side. You give me a cut of your revenue, and it'll be kind of a win-win. Essentially, you'll be the shooting guy, we'll be the vertical jump guys, and we'll work together. And I said, that sounds great. So he flew me out to Virginia, gave me a crash course in digital marketing. Before working with him and like figuring it all out, I was getting maybe like 4 email lead signups a day on my webpage. After just a very simple kind of crash course with him, I went to doing like 350 to 400 email signups a day.
A day?
Yeah, not really changing anything, just like basically changing the process. And that was my very first kind of like aha moment of like business, and especially like online business. The difference between success and not is like so razor thin, and it just has to do with like the process in between. And so he helped out a ton with like, hey, this is how you set up a landing page. This is how you get people to landing page. This is the copy on the landing page, what it should look like. You shouldn't have these kind of pictures. You should have these kind of pictures. All that sort of stuff kind of like really changed the game. So I was like, I don't know. I got kind of through the boot camp with him, reworked the original 10-minute shooting trainer project or product, changed the name, changed the landing page, changed the offering. And I was like, man, I don't know. And this was like kind of late June. And I was like, I needed to let my superintendent know if I was coming back to school or not, starting in August. And I was like, man, I don't know if this is going to work. Like I might have to go back to school. And he was like, listen, every dollar you make less than your teaching contract, I'll pay you. He was like, if your teaching contract's $30,000, you make $20,000, I'll give you $10,000. Like he's like, there's no way that you're not gonna do more than you were doing teaching.
This was Adam?
Adam, yeah, my mentor guy.
He was gonna pay you.
He was gonna pay me. He's like, I'll pay you, like out of my own pocket.
So they must have been killing.
I'll pay you the difference. And I was like, Done. So I called my superintendent. It was like, hey, sorry, I can't come back. I'm going to go full time. And so for the next like week or two, we like kind of put all the finishing polishes on the launch, fired it out there, had like a strategy in place, and did like $10,000 in the first week. And so what's crazy, it was my very first like, whoa, like just the process of how you do things matters so much compared to the actual like product. Now the actual product has to be good, because if it sucks, then it's not worth marketing, and nobody's going to come back, and it's going to be a one-time thing, right? So like the product is still incredibly important, but the process to get people into the product is really, really important.
What was the biggest thing about that process that you learned?
So the biggest thing would be like
huge on the process.
Yeah, the lead generation. So how do you get actual people to an email list, right? You can't just like hope they get there. So like very specific, giving something away for free that very specifically matches the video that you're on. So, a lot of times people call them a lead magnet or something that you'll give away for free to get an email or a contact or whatever. Before I was just like, hey, get a free get a free membership over at shopmechanics.com. And I had like a sign-up thing on shopmechanics.com, and that was it. And this is all like now in 2024, probably pretty rudimentary that like a lot of people know. But at the time, it was like completely new to me. And so instead, I'd have like a ball handling workout that I'd have for free. I'd have a shooting workout that I'd have for free. I'd have a scoring workout that I'd have for free. And whatever video I put on YouTube, that was the one that I'd say for free. So I wasn't doing a shooting one on a ball handling one. I was doing a shooting one on a shooting one. Gotcha. And so basically, I utilized YouTube as essentially kind of like a customer intent, SEO engine.
Yeah.
So essentially, if somebody shoots how to shoot a basketball perfectly, if I give them a workout about how to shoot a basketball, it's probably more likely that they're going to want to check it out rather than if they, are looking at an entertainment video of like basketball highlights or something like that. So I'd say that was like the biggest piece, was how do you actually like move somebody off platform onto an email list or an SMS list or something like that, and then how do you, I'd say phase 2 is how do you like create a product that is really high quality, but also hits the pain points that the customer wants. And so those were kind of like the two biggest pieces, I'd say. Yeah.
I've been battling sometimes like with like how you just said, what the customer wants. So sometimes for me, as a coach or in the strength world, it's like, I know what they need.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean they always want it.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And like when we see them face to face and they're in-house, it's easy to be able to relate with them and explain the whys. But on the media side of it or on the marketing side of it, sometimes I'm like, this is what they're going to do. Like this is, but it, like then, takes outside voices to tell me like, hey, even if that's the best thing for them, that's not what they're searching. That's not what they're looking for. So that's
exactly.
But I still want to emphasize quality too. You know what I mean? So it's like going back to that first statement, how you said some guys are so old school and then some guys are just for the clickbait. You know what I mean? So trying to find that in between is crazy hard.
Yeah.
With Players TV, so talk to me. What is Players TV, and like what do you guys do now? I mean, you're working with Chris Paul. I mean, all these NBA athletes, all these professional athletes. You're in Forbes magazine. Just
try to.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So what is Players TV, and what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Players TV is basically sports lifestyle and culture. So kind of like I would say the easiest way to explain it is it's like what the Food Network did for food or what Comedy Central did for comedy, we do for professional athletes, specifically off-field, off-court, away from the thing. So more personality-driven. So like we don't do a ton of like, this is an athlete working out, this is an athlete in the gym. Pro Class, the sister company, does that sort of stuff. Players TV is more focused around personality. So like, their cooking shows, their, reality shows, their business shows, investment shows, that sort of stuff. And really kind of taking content with athletes from being more very specific, kind of like gym and field driven, to being kind of more entertainment driven. And
like
so
the human side of them almost.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like really our main thesis is it's all about fan and athlete connection. So the more a fan cares about an athlete as a person, the more they're going to care about them on the field or on the court. And we really saw this change as social media started to get big, right? Now, individual athletes, Damian Lillard has a lot more Instagram followers than the Milwaukee Bucks have. And people want to follow athletes and learn more about them, and the more they're connected, the more they care. And so essentially that's kind of our goal with Players TV. We really built it off the power of the group collective. So instead of just like launching it and kind of like, trying to figure out how to get athletes involved, instead we basically took about 2 years where we were pitching athletes on the road, kind of corralling them all like cats at the same time to say like, hey, you guys are so much more powerful if you come together, and instead of being like, against each other here and there, let's bring everybody together. Power of the collective, own their own content, own their own IP, and own their own distribution was kind of the name of the game. So we have about 60 professional athletes as investors, partners, content creators.
That's awesome.
We've got probably about 15 that were like the founding members, and those were like, pretty big names like Chris Paul, Kyrie Irving, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo, Dame, Ken Griffey Jr. Cool. And too many to list. And really kind of like we were very specific on bringing athletes into the fold who were about the collective. A lot of them served on, the players' associations for the leagues, and guys that are like, hey, we are so much stronger when we come together, and that's why we kind of like, I think, worked early on. Yeah.
When you're hanging out with those athletes, what do you see maybe from their habits or their like what do you think separates them from us? Besides, obviously, they're talented, you know what I mean? But to be at the level of Paul and Kyrie and Griffey, you know what I mean? What do you from being around them, what have you learned from them?
Yeah, I would say like insane attention to detail. And you probably hear it in like a lot of stories, right? People tell Kobe Bryant stories and you hear about his insane level of detail. It's like that with a lot of athletes. And it doesn't really matter if it's sports or business or investing or philanthropy. The insane attention on detail is something I see over and over and over again, right? It doesn't matter if it's Chris Paul analyzing business investments or Kyrie Irving putting on a philanthropy drive where he feeds, 500 local people or whatever it is. Like the attention to detail is insane, and really kind of like helped me try to level up my attention to detail because it's like, this is a group of people who probably have like every excuse in the world to phone in whatever it is they're doing outside of their sport.
Yep.
And instead, they're like so incredibly talented, like in every facet of life. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen.
That's all. So when you're working with them, and again, even just like what was your pitch to a guy like Chris Paul? You know what I mean? And again, being a smaller guy from Idaho, not pro athlete. How were you able to relate with them and get to that level? For them to realize that you guys, also are paying attention to detail to get them to kind of buy into it and build it to what it's become now.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece is that essentially, like, they could see the long-term vision, right? And I think it helps that, like, athletes are at a point where they're very well compensated, especially, like, male athletes in the major sports. And so, essentially, I think they could see, like, hey, I could take, a $300,000 check for content from Fox or ESPN or wherever else. Like, that's fine, but I don't really need it. And instead, I'd much rather create something that was, more beneficial to me, and also, a longer-term legacy as far as like what we can build. So like a really great, kind of, I would say, parallel that a lot of people don't understand is the Golf Channel. So Jack actually built the Golf Channel originally and essentially, turned it into like the big thing that it is today. And he really saw the vision of like, hey, we need to have distribution for this sport. And the more distribution we have, the more we can control it and the better we can build it. And so that was a really interesting kind of like parallel case study that we had early on. It was like, hey, he saw the vision early on, what can we do to kind of showcase our athletes? So we use that as a case study a lot of times in our pitches and that sort of stuff. And athletes love the idea of having their own media company that's going to be a safe space, that's not going to try to tear them down or, be divisive and pit them against each other. And so really it wasn't that hard of a pitch because it was like, hey, listen, you guys are so much more powerful if you come together. And instead of being like, put head to head on the ESPNs and the Bleacher Reports of the world, why don't you guys own your own distribution network where you can tell your own stories, you can do your own content, you can essentially, worst case scenario, use it as a leverage point for other deals in the ecosystem. And so it was kind of like a win-win-win pitch for the most part.
Man, that's awesome. What's your job exactly with them? Like, what are you doing? Because I know you were cutting and editing videos. Yeah. What are you doing now with them?
Yeah, so I oversee more everything content creative of the company. So my co-founder, Duran, he oversees sales and athlete relations, and I oversee more of like the content creative. So
gotcha.
Essentially, I'll oversee programming, content, social, that sort of stuff.
Okay, awesome. I got to ask you, man, with what you've seen with us, and we haven't chatted in a while, in a few years, but you've seen a little bit of what we've been doing. What do you feel like? Is there any recommendations or something you think we could do or do differently, or what do you see in a market like ours?
No, I love it. And you guys I would say you guys are ahead of the curve for a lot of, companies that are doing the same sort of thing that you're doing. I mean, you have dedicated media that's doing their thing. You've got dedicated resources to it. So that's like the first step and one that a lot of people don't even take. So big kudos there. I would say like, you're probably getting ready for like that next level of marketing. So the things where it's like, hey, utilizing content for lead generation, utilizing content for customer ascension. How do you get one customer who maybe their lifetime customer value is $2,400? How do you use your content to make that lifetime customer value $3,600 or whatever it is, right? And so from the outside looking in, and maybe you guys are already working on it or doing it, that would be like where I would kind of like probably put the next focus on. And really, like, at the end of the day, like marketing, and my buddy Adam, the mentor guy earlier I talked about, he was always like, the only thing you need to think about is pain, gain, logic, and testimonial. He's like, when it comes to people buying things, pain, gain, logic, and testimonial are the reasons why people buy things. So pain, what are their pain points, right? You were talking earlier about the ACL recovery that you guys are doing now. Huge pain point for a lot of athletes, right? Either A, they've had an ACL injury and they're trying to get back in the game, or B, they're terrified they're going to have an ACL injury, as it's before they're even in it, right? So like my daughter's 9, I'm already like kind of worried about ACL stuff right now. And if it was like, if you had some sort of piece of marketing that was like, hey, we've got a young demographic training, for like 9 to 12-year-olds, it's ACL prevention, blah, 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 I'd be like, money out of the wallet for you, right? And so I'd say like that's probably the first thing is like, pain. What are the pain points of customers and how can you guys lean into it? Gain, what's to be gained from it, right? Gain is one that I think a lot of people hit in their marketing quite a bit because it's like kind of the easiest one where it's like, oh, you're going to be bigger, you're going to be stronger, you're going to be faster, you're going to be more, bulletproof, whatever it is. So that one's normally not that hard and most people do it pretty well. And so logic is the other piece. Like logically, why does it make sense for somebody to train with you, right? And that might be the price point. It might be, we were talking about earlier, staff is fantastic. So it might be the incredible staff that you're highlighting. It might be that like, they're people that your kids can learn from a personal level as well. What is like the logical reason for somebody to come to your guys' gym versus somebody else's gym? That'd be like a huge piece. And then testimonials, like in the fitness and like performance industry, is just the go-to, tried and true. Nothing speaks as well as like results, right? So if you can say there's this athlete that their 40 time was this, and after it with us, their 40 time was that. If there's this athlete and their fat percentage was this, and after it, their fat percentage was that. The classic like before and after, right? Those are the things that are like beyond anything else you can do from a marketing perspective is like showing the actual results that you get. And if you kind of combine all the stuff together, you can have like a little bit of pain, a little bit of gain, a little bit of logic, and it's mixed with testimonial. I would format a lot of your content around that. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, we're definitely trying to get. It's tough to put another body in-house.
Oh yeah, Even at our Boise facility already, it's been a short amount of time, and it's tough to get more bodies here. And my coaches are working their ass off. You know what I mean, to where we're training so much, so it's like. And we're getting a lot of phone calls. We're getting, coaches and kids. So the remote is something that we're going to go after. And every piece of content that we've been building lately has been like, not so much just about like lately, like just the views and stuff like that, but more like that interaction. More like, are we getting the right amount, hopefully eventually the right leads to where we can train remotely? But you know what I mean? And can we give the same product in-house or as close as we possibly can to somebody outside of here? You know what I mean? And I think our niche is going to be the speed side of things, to where that's where we're going to work our way to. And luckily, again, I have Robert because I have no idea what I'm doing on that. Anytime we've only done I think we've done like one paid ad, maybe two. Then it was for our adult class, which, it was a terrible ad, but we had like 15 people to reach out to it. You know what I mean? That is the next phase for us.
That makes sense.
Something we haven't had to focus on the sales side of things very much. We actually brought in a sales guy. We call him a recruiter, to more just make sure the in-house is always full. All the clients are treated well. Everybody's good there. And now it's like, okay, how do we focus on the remote? How do we focus on the ACL, the return to play? That's trying to figure out those steps it's a different business. It's something completely different than I've ever done.
Completely different.
Head's been in the trenches, sitting in the weight room, working with the colleges. And so it's like, now it's like, okay, how do we scale? Because that's besides putting more bodies in here, maybe sometimes if we have too many people in here, like I feel like the product goes down. So it's like, okay,
makes sense.
We either charge everybody here more, which I don't want to do, what I mean? Or we put more bodies in here, which nobody,
you also don't want to do.
We don't want. So it's like, okay, how can we reach a bigger audience?
That makes sense.
And that's kind of been our goal for this year, and be the best high school strength conditioning program in the country. And that's what we're going for. So that's why I was just creeping on you again. I'm like, all right, I gotta have Colin on here. I gotta pick his brain on how he went about it. What's your next step with Players TV? What's what's your 5-year vision with it? I love how you've pivoted. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You've done different things. You know, so obviously it can change. You know, but what's the long-term goal you think with that?
Yeah, we're just getting ready to launch our Series A fundraising round. So getting ready to raise, kind of like scalable capital. We've been essentially up to this point kind of, everybody's wearing 8 hats. We've been scrappy startup. We've raised like in total about $6 million over the like lifetime of the company. About $3 million from athletes and about $3.2 million from fans that we actually like raised from like individual people. And so like we've kind of like built the proof of concept. We built the foundation. We built the scalable kind of like monetization side from ad sales, sponsorship sales, that sort of stuff. So probably the fundraise is the next piece, and then really kind of like turning on the gasoline to make it a very well-known, essentially kind of like new age sports media company. I'd say right now we're probably like the best kept secret in sports.
I love it.
And we'd like to change that.
Okay. Yeah.
Get it kind of to be a little bit more out there and, really kind of scale to the next step. So on the Players TV side, that means, kind of essentially creating more original content. We're getting ready to launch our direct-to-consumer app here shortly, which is kind of like, we call it the Hulu of sports lifestyle and culture, where it's a conglomerate of like our content plus a lot of content partners, and really kind of being like a fan platform. And then also getting ready to launch our studio here shortly as well, which is more like, having athletes with their content concepts to shop and sell to different streamers and that sort of stuff. So, basically we kind of have like 3 arms of the company. We've got the network, we've got the direct-to-consumer, and we've got the studio. And, and kind of like a new age digital media company. Those are kind of the 3 big buckets.
Coming from a teacher to doing that, has it been harder than you thought it was going to be?
Yes and no. It's always hard. Like everything you do is hard. And, I was listening to a entrepreneur guy I like a while back, and he was talking about how essentially everything's hard. Yep. Whether it's like a little bit outcome or a big outcome, it's all going to be hard. Yeah. And so essentially, I kind of thought to myself, if you're going to chase a dragon, it might as well be a big one. So essentially, like, awesome. It's hard, but it's no harder than probably anybody else's job. It's no harder than what you guys do. It's no harder than what, my dad, who's an architect, what he does is just kind of like a different kind of hard.
Yeah.
And if you got that dog in you and you're willing to grind and like, pivot and learn on the fly and all that sort of stuff, like, it generally seems to work out.
I love it. Do you and your company, I got to ask, do you guys like set goals? I mean, do you guys, like, obviously everybody talks about them, like, hey, we want to be here. But, I mean, do you guys write things down? Do you have, like, you're like, hey, this quarter we want to be here. What's your process on that, on the growth side of things? Because, literally from hooping back in the Boys and Girls Club to now, you've had so much growth. Has it just been like, hey, just head down working? Or, have you kind of tried to draw out the next 90 days? Or, what's your process with that? I always try to figure out the habits of guys and how can I teach my employees, my athletes, my coaches, you know what I mean? How do you guys go about that with your company?
We definitely have goals, especially around like sales and revenue and, distribution and that sort of stuff. We definitely have goals, and we'll kind of like update those pretty frequently. With that being said, I would say our really kind of like MO has just been head down and like sprint.
Yeah.
I like to say it's the 800 meter because it's like, it's a sprint, but it's also a distance, but you still got to sprint the whole time.
Yeah, that's one of the worst runs ever.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And so essentially, like, we're basically in an 800 meter sprint.
Okay.
And so at all times, we're kind of head down. One of the things that helps us are most of the people who we hire and are successful in the company are former athletes, not necessarily like super high level athletes, but people who have like played team sports, understand that like, hey, there's sacrifice.
Yes, yeah.
There's going to be long nights. There's going to be, work hard, play hard kind of situations. And so we've really, I would say, won by like our core group of employees who've been with us from the beginning are all just kind of like have that dog in them, have that kind of like athlete of like, yo, let's get it done. Like, let's keep it moving. Most of our employees also have like equity stakes in the company. So it's kind of like a cool, everybody wins as we continue to build the thing. And so it really does feel kind of like a team situation where it's like, hey, let's all get in the foxhole and make it happen.
How many employees do you have?
So we're currently at about 22, I want to say. I think we got a couple more starting here in the next couple of weeks. We'll be to 25 here shortly. And then I think post-Series A fundraise, we'll probably add another like 30 bodies.
How hard is it to manage those guys? Or to lead those guys, you know what I mean? Maybe manage isn't always the right word. You know what I mean? But how hard is that? Because you guys, I'm assuming you guys are pretty remote.
Yeah, we're super remote.
So how do you make that work? How do you make it feel like a team?
That's
I have one location 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
I have to think about it all the time, you know?
That's a good question. And so, like, you know, we announced the company 2 weeks before the pandemic shut down the country. And so, essentially, we basically launched in the pandemic and grew the first 2 years in the pandemic. And so, we just kind of like kept to remote after that. So, we've got employees, you know, a few here in Boise, Dallas, New York, Florida, Georgia, Vancouver, Canada. So we're a little bit all over the place. And I think, you know, managing gets easier with the right kind of hires. And so if you're hiring the type of people that maybe need a lot of external motivation, I think the remote thing could be really difficult. And we had some, you know, definitely growing pains early on in the company of finding the right kinds of hires in the right kinds of spot. But now the team that we have in place and kind of like the managers of each division, both, you know, the sales, the talent, the partnerships, and the content are all really, really good at essentially kind of managing and keeping the boat afloat. So that's been, I would say, like our secret sauce, but it's not even really that secret. Yeah. It's just hire great people.
That's but hard.
Yeah,
that's
not easy.
It's like the hardest part about business, but it's also the best thing about business.
For sure.
Like the staff we have right now, like the juice, the camaraderie, how close we are, it's like better than it's ever been. And it's just like the guys I have right now are unreal. And trying to and girl Amy's an absolute dog. How do I keep pushing them? You know what I mean? Because if I don't, then if I'm not staying ahead, you know what I mean? These guys they don't need a lot of external motivation to keep them going. You know what I mean? But that finding those right people is tricky, man.
Well, let me ask you then, because I'm curious about this. So you have a very like niche business where you can't just like hire anybody off the street, right? Depending on what it is, whether it's your content guy or whoever, like maybe that's a different bucket. But for like the actual coaches, trainers, performance to scale, you have to find like the right people. You have to make the economics work. You have to make sure that they're not going to be somebody who's going to be a competitor later on. Like, how do you go about making sure that you have like the quality from the, you know, actual people that you hire in-house?
Yeah, I think when I started, I messed up by trying to hire just quality. When my quality was, how many letters did you have behind your name?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did you have this degree? Did you have this cert? Did you have this? Did you have this? You know what I mean? And some of the, I have those letters. I'm not saying those guys are all terrible, but a lot of the times those weren't the people that I wanted. You know what I mean? Those people couldn't relate to a kid.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they were selfish. Not all of them, but some of them were. You know what I mean? So it's taken me a while. I mean, there was a point where I lost everybody. It was just me. You know, 4 or 5 years in, where it was rough.
I've been there.
It was
back to square one.
I had to coach, you know, 15 different teams and clubs by myself all on the same day. But I'm trying to give them a good service. You know, hey, we're getting, you know, AJ Storms. Funny story. One of my guys, he literally just walked in one day. He was one of our first players. You know, had a cup of coffee with the Chargers for a while. But he was one of our first athletes. He was a stud. He just walks in to come hoop one day, and I go, AJ, you trying to work tonight? Because it was me and him by myself. It was me by myself. He walks in, what are you going? I'm hiring you today.
He's like, all right.
And I love that guy to death now. He's in the Air Force. He's a great dad, great family. But he saved me because it was literally just me solo. It was just long story, and he walked in, and I got him. But moving forward to the way that I hire guys now, to me, it's two things. To me, the biggest thing is you got to treat other people well. Yeah. And like if I can see that, like even if they coach or if they're a teammate and they treat other people good, like it doesn't matter. I can give them, because then they're going to relate with them. Then they're going to be able to relate with the athlete. You know what I mean? I can teach them how to teach somebody how to run. I can teach them how to lift. And the other thing is they have to be able to work hard. So to me, it's like those two biggest things. Like, and I'm trying to do that for my own kids, for my 2-year-old and my 1-year-old. Obviously not yet, but if you treat others well and you work hard, I think you're going to have a ton of success. And like that's one of the biggest things I've learned too. You know, even when I first started, I was egotistical and it was like, oh, I'm going to kill these guys. I'm way better than these guys. And now it's like none of that ever helps. Yeah. Ever helps. You know what I mean? And if you look at the best guys in the world, they're never dogging somebody else. They're never doing anything. You know what I mean? It's where it's like, if I find somebody that, like these guys last night, they were in here. They were training at 6. We had this event, so they were here till 7 o'clock at night. Then we stayed for an hour and just chatted and they loved it. The energy was insane. And Cherry gave me a ride home an hour later, like you know what I mean. And it was like because they just love being here. They love doing it for the kids. Yeah. And every single employee that I have does that. I almost have to tell them to go home. You know what I mean? And that's finding that right person has been really hard. But you know, when you do find them, I feel like you can tell right away. Like it's hard to lie about that. You know what I mean? So it's not. I want you to have the credentials. I want you to have the degree. I mean, on our website, if you apply for us, you have to have the CSCS. You have to have the bachelor's degree. But a lot of the guys I hire don't. Yeah. You know what I mean? Our GM, Augie, is I mean, you ask anybody, he's the best thing about our business. I mean, he keeps everything together. He runs this thing. He was one of the first athletes I ever had.
Oh, dope.
Trained me all the way through. He played a little bit of independent pro baseball. When he was done, he was kind of trying to figure out what he wanted to do, and I just knew he was always one of the best dudes. I'm like, hey, you're going to come coach for me.
I got a spot for you.
Murdered it. Killed it right away. Then tried to get him to be a GM. One of our GMs left, his best friend, another one of my first guys ever, great human. And then, I go, Augie, you need to be the GM. He's like, whoa, business, numbers. Like, he didn't want to do that. You know, I'm like, no, it's like, I could teach you that.
Yeah,
like,
you're smart. You'll figure it out.
but it wasn't even about being smart. It was him, the relationship skills that he has. You know? I'm very high strung, very trying to do this. Sometimes a little abrasive. You know what I mean? And Augie's like the complete opposite. Like, he's calm, he's collective, but he always gets stuff done. Like, if shit's hitting the fan, like, Augie's like, I'll get it done. I'll figure it out. Anytime our guys need something, he'll get it done. He'll figure it out. The kids, and every kid loves him. He's everybody's best friend here. Yeah. So those are and he's a phenomenal coach. Like, now he's one of the best coaches. I mean
got
in
the
the
chops to
Northwest.
back it
He's
up.
unreal, right?
Yeah.
So like those are the guys that I try to hire. You know what I mean? And luckily, most of the people here either trained or interned with us, or Wyatt has turned into an absolute stud. We looked at him for a while. At the beginning, he was new. I didn't know if he really wanted to be the strength coach, but then watched him coach for a year, and he just turned into an absolute stud. Saw how much work he put in. I'm like, dude, cool. I can work with anybody that wants to work their ass off. You know what I mean? The other ones interned here or I trained, and so I listened to I got to talk with Mark Schmidt. Luckily, his daughters are one of our employees here, but Mark Schmidt owns D&B.
Yeah.
And he goes, we hire our clients, and I didn't even think about it like that. But so anybody that's been through there, that knows the culture, that knows the system, and they see how well they are and how well they treat other people, then he snags them.
Oh,
and it's the same thing that it's I was kind of doing that unconsciously because I had relationships, but now it's like. Now it's 100% conscious. It's
now
like
you're scouting.
Yes. What who's a great teammate? Who's somebody that not just the best athlete. You don't need to be that guy, but like, who's like somebody who brings them with them. If somebody else is getting treated poorly, do they pick them up and do they work their butt off? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's extremely hard, but when you find them, it's just the coolest thing ever. And when you don't, we've had it to where it's like I've had these group and you have somebody that doesn't do it and it just stands out. It hurts the whole culture, you know what I mean? And as a boss trying to get rid of somebody, it's one of the hardest things to do, you know?
Yeah, it's tough. What's cool about it too, though, and I see it happening with your guys' company, is it's almost like success rolls into success. And it's like the snowball, right? And so like the more great people you bring in-house, the more great people it's going to attract, the more former athletes who could be great teachers and educators, want to come back to your ecosystem. So it probably is the type of thing where like once the ball starts rolling, it gets a little bit easier as time goes on. And it's the same way where when you see somebody that just takes it to it like a sponge, it's just so rewarding. So like my guy Jake Wilbur, who
absolute stud.
Was originally a student when I was a teacher, and then he became my shop mechanics cameraman, and it was basically because nobody else would show up at 5 a.m. when I had to shoot the videos, and he was the only dude who'd show up and hold the camera. So then he started learning a little bit more about digital content, whatever, and then he got a little bit better and a little bit better, and now he's probably one of the best sports content creators, I would argue, in the United States. He's the head of our content and multimedia division at Players TV. And he was just a kid from high school who just like showed him, was like, yeah, I'll hold the camera, like whatever, I'll figure it out. Okay, I'll figure out how to edit this, whatever. And so it's cool because like once you have people like that are with the company, it becomes, like you said, sticks out like a sore thumb if somebody's not.
Yep.
And the people who are like really gravitate on pretty quick. And so I think that's been one of the big pieces for us, and it sounds like it's been a huge piece for you guys too.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Steve, used to always say, I just hire anybody with a pulse. You know what I mean? Because it's like you think you're growing and you just snag somebody. So, really being selective about it. I think that's one of the tough things too. Like we get applications quite a bit. We get people that come in that have played at a high level, but then it's like it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? If you don't have those characteristics or if you don't fit in, you know what I mean? And like even like him, like it sounds like with Jake. So Cherry with he was.
I've seen you, Cherry.
Yeah, so
I've seen your stuff. You're blowing up.
Yeah, but the amount of work that he puts in is
huge.
Is insane.
Going to every game.
Not just for us, for everybody. But he started the same way. It was hilarious because he worked with Rocky Baseball. He would say, not one of the better guys. He was more nervous when he came in, you know what I mean? But he started filming. Then it was like, hey, help us out with a couple of projects. And then we ended up hiring him full-time or part-time, full-time, whatever he does, you know what I mean? However, I have him structured, but I mean, he lives here, you know what I mean? And he just treats everybody well too. And it's been to find that piece and to find our front desk, right now Gracie's unreal, and then the coach is like putting that all together is. How do you scale that? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. Championship team. You're putting it together.
Yes. He's about to have guys working underneath him soon, too.
That's
cool.
the next phase.
Colin, man, I appreciate it, man. I'm going to keep picking your brain on all this stuff and keep watching you, man. And Jake's a stud, too, man. It was fun to be able to work with him a little bit, man. Keep killing it. I appreciate you coming in, man.
Cool, man. Much appreciated.